Hey everybody, welcome back to The Chosen Chat. My name is Justin.
I'm Kerri.
And today we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 7. And all of the questions that we use during our conversation can be found in the description below, along with some scripture references that can help point you back to the Bible so you can read some of the stories that we see in this episode. Our hope is that as you watch us have this conversation, it will encourage you to be having similar conversations with people around you about this really cool TV show and all that God is teaching you through it and how you are seeing Jesus come alive on the screen. All right, so today I'm going to ask, first I want to ask you, and then we're going to talk about one scene in particular, but I want to ask you first, what part of this episode really grabbed your attention?
Do you want me to go first or do you want to go first since yours comes before mine?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the part I love is when Jesus is arrested in this episode and he is brought before Quintus. Now, this did not happen in the Bible, but the conversation is very plausible. And they're having this conversation about flesh and bones. And Jesus does some things that make them mad, bones. Jesus does some things that make them happy, flesh. And he's like, I don't know what to make of you. And Jesus is like, it's going to be a lot of people's problem. And I think we've not gotten past that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our culture likes to pick and choose some things about Jesus. They take what they think of as flesh and throw away the bones. And that just kind of struck me that, wow, things are the same.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's just culture. I think it's all of us.
Oh, yeah.
I'm reading through the Gospels right now, and I got to, I think it was like Matthew 9, 10, 11. Mm-hmm. There's this weird, almost monologue teaching that Jesus does in there. Woo! It is a doozy. And I had a similar thought. Uh-huh. I was like, man, there are things that I have put to memory that I like. Mm-hmm. There are things that I've been doing this a long time and I still set that one aside in the back of my mind and pretend as if it's not there.
Yeah.
Right? There are things that I want to keep and hold to and say, yeah, that's Jesus. There are things where I'm like, I don't know if I like that part.
Right.
And so I think we all do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good challenge for all of us to lean into even the uncomfortable places and say, what is Jesus trying to do here?
Right.
You know? So, okay, my part, and this is where we're going to sit down for just a few minutes here. My part was the conversation that happened between some of the Pharisees, Shmuel, and Yusuf. All right, so you said Sam and Joe. Let's call them Sam and Joe. And Shmuel shows up, and they're talking about wanting to catch Jesus in healing on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm.
Because Shmuel's research is on false prophecy, and he thinks Jesus is a false prophet.
Yes. Okay, so then they are talking about using a woman named Tamar.
Mm-hmm. Who's not in the Bible. But plausible.
She is a follower of Jesus in the show. And use her testimony because she saw Jesus do this. Mm-hmm. And there's a comment. It's just I think it's a throwaway. I don't think it's a throwaway.
I mean, for them, it would have been.
Yes, but I don't think it's a throwaway for the show. No. I think it's planted. And they say, but a woman's testimony can never be trusted.
Yeah, I think he says worthless, actually. Yeah.
A woman's testimony is worthless.
Worthless, yeah.
And, okay, where do I want to go here? There's several ways I want to go. Uh-huh. Okay, do your like Bible nerd thing. Tell us about that was true. Totally true. Mm-hmm. That's how women's testimonies were worthless.
Yes. So
talk to us about
in
that.
The Jewish legal system, in order for a case to be brought, or in order for someone to be convicted, it had to rely on the testimony of two witnesses, and that's going to be really important later on. But those witnesses could not be female. They did not believe a woman could tell the truth or be objective in her statements. Yeah.
So they couldn't be trusted.
Their words could not be trusted. And it's not because they thought anything was wrong with their character, just that, oh, it's a woman. She's easily deceived, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, okay. Now, what I find to be so interesting about Jesus is Jesus does these Jesus things where he flips. So he's living within a system. And this kind of goes to his conversation that you pointed out. He's living within a religious system, in a political system, in a culture, and Jesus didn't come to transform that system. He came to actually establish a new system. And so in this system, women's testimonies are worthless. They cannot be trusted. But in Jesus's system, in his polis, his politics, in his kingdom, in his empire, who does Jesus, who does the God of the universe choose to be the first witness testifying of the resurrection of Jesus?
Oh, yeah.
Who was it?
A woman, plus a couple other women. And not only that, let's go back to the very beginning. Who does the angel talk to first? A woman.
Yes.
And
to say that God is coming in flesh.
Also, to tell her fiance, oh no, I haven't been unfaithful. An angel talked to me and this is God's baby.
Testimony.
And it was like, God just expects Joseph to believe her.
How about, and you might be thinking, okay, it's just a couple places. How about the woman at the well?
Yes, she was the first person that Jesus told was the Messiah.
And where did she take the gospel?
She took it to her town.
To the Samaritans, who were Gentiles.
Yep.
Who were not part of God's people. That's what I mean.
They were like...
half and half.
Half and half. Yeah.
But I've thought about this. So many people, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, so many people think that the gospel going to the Gentiles, people who are not a part of God's people, they give that to Paul.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Jesus was already doing that. He did that with the woman that he met at the well.
Absolutely.
She was the first missionary to the people who were not part of Israel. Yeah?
Absolutely.
And he trusted her testimony.
Yes. You know, one of my favorite parts of the resurrection account is found in the book of Mark, and it's actually a throwaway. Like, people skip over it all the time. So the first people to tell the disciples that Jesus was alive were
the
women. And then in Mark, the first time Jesus appears to the disciples, the Bible says, and then he strongly rebuked them for not believing the testimony of those who had come before. Which were the women.
Which would have been normal.
Yeah.
And so in this culture, in this system, in this polis, in this political arena, you didn't trust the testimony of women.
Correct.
Jesus came to establish a new polis, a new kingdom, a new way of operating that was altogether other. And in this one, you're going to trust the testimony of women.
Absolutely.
You're going to. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to use women. I'm going to work through women's testimony to bring about new creation and new covenant and resurrection life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is why this comment is not a throwaway for The Chosen. I am convinced Dallas Jenkins put this in there on purpose to point towards the resurrection story. It's coming.
Yes.
And for the religious leaders, for the politicians of the time, for the religious elite, for all of that, this is one of the ways that Jesus was saying, my kingdom is completely different.
Yes.
Now, the bad news is that we have not gotten past this.
No, and if we go back to the fish and bones illustration, or the flesh and bones illustration with what Quintus was saying, I think a lot of times we read the Gospels through the lens of Paul. We don't read Paul through the lens of the Gospels. And we think of that as that's just a thing that Jesus did, but we're not doing that anymore.
And Paul comes to lay down the actual theology.
And Paul actually comes and fixes what Jesus did. And we're like, that's a bone. We're just going to throw that away because what Paul says is different. Not the case at all.
It's not. Paul would never contradict the person of Jesus.
Exactly.
And so then we have to reread these problem texts that talk about how women are operating within the church. We have to start reading them through the lens of Jesus' new kingdom, new empire that he came to establish, where women's testimonies are to be worthy of believing and trusted.
Absolutely.
And so still in the church, we have this divide over that when it comes to testimony, we're also talking about the proclamation of the gospel, which whatever word or phrase you want to use, preaching, to lead the people of God, to testify on behalf of God, to prophesy on the behalf of God, whatever you want to say.
Right.
We still have this divide saying, some in the church say, nope, can't do it because of what Paul said. And some who are saying, actually, though, like Jesus totally trusted the testimony of women.
Yes.
And expects us to do the same. And I just want to challenge us that we are not, let's stop reading Paul and then reading Jesus through the lens of Paul. Let's start reading Jesus and read Paul through the lens of Jesus. That would help. Secondly, we are not operating in the polis, in the empire of this world. We are a part of a new kingdom that Jesus has come to establish, where both men and women's testimony about the resurrection of Jesus should be heard and can be trusted.
Absolutely. And lest we're accused of throwing away Paul's statements, because yes, Paul does make some very clear statements that on the surface seem prohibitive. This is why you have to do your work. And you have to research and you have to understand context. And that's tough.
It is.
It's tough to do. It is hard work, but I promise you it is worth it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's lots of opinions out there. And I just want to, I think that jumped off the screen at me, and I want to make sure that we name at One Life, we trust the testimony of women.
Absolutely. And I love that that's what jumped out at you, because I was like, well, of course it's not.
and so at our church, women preach, women lead, men preach, men lead, women and men proclaim the resurrection of Jesus. And it's really beautiful.
It is.
And it hasn't done damage to the men of our church. It hasn't, we're not veering off onto some liberal theology.
No, there's no slippery slope.
This is not a slippery slope.
No.
We believe that Jesus trusted the testimony of women, and therefore we should as well. And that is really great news.
It is.
It's a new kingdom that he came to establish. And sometimes we just don't get it.
Right.
We don't understand it. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard because you got all this baggage and you got all these lenses that you're bringing into it. But I want to give you open eyes to see something completely new.
Absolutely. And I love that, going back to what I was saying, he's like, just don't cause any more problems for me. And Jesus is like, I can't promise that.
I can't promise that.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to land the plane there. For some of you, this is going to be hard. And some of you, you're already there. But I hope that it leads to some conversation. What's the good news? Where's the resistance? And then where is a place where you can put this stuff into action? I hope it leads some great conversations.
Yes.
So thanks so much for hanging out with us. And we'll be back for the next episode very, very soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.